Ham kratur aham jagya, sodhaham aham aushidam, mantroham aham evajyam, aham agnir aham hutam. Aham, I. Kratu, Vedic ritual. Aham, I. Yajna, smriti, sacrifice. Swada, oblation. Aushadam, healing herb. Mantra, transcendental chant. Eva, certainly. Ajam, melted butter. Agni, fire. Hutam, offering. But as I who am the ritual, I the sacrifice, the offering to the ancestors, the healing herb, the transcendental chant, I am the butter and the fire and the offering. Purport. The Vedic sacrifice known as Jyotishtama is also Krishna, and he is also the Mahayagya mentioned in the Smriti. The oblations offered to the Pitriloka, or the sacrifice performed to please the Pitriloka, considered as a kind of drug in the form of clarified butter, is also Krishna. The mantras chanted in this connection are also Krishna, and many other commodities made with milk products for offering in the sacrifice are also Krishna. The fire is also Krishna, because fire is one of the 5 material elements and is therefore claimed as the separated energy of Krishna. In other words, the Vedic sacrifices recommended in the Karma Kanda of division of the Vedas are in total also Krishna. Or in other words, those who are engaged in rendering devotional service under Krishna are to be understood to have performed all the sacrifices recommended in the Vedas. And let's do a Mangala Charana. Om. What page? Agyana. Timirandasya Gyanan Jana Shalakaya Chakshurunmiditam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. 158. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Datati Swapadantikam. The first verse is a verse of gratitude for the teacher opening one's eyes to knowledge. And the second verse, you keep the tune. And the next verse, Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. His obeisances to Srila Rupa Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami was present when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Rath Yatra sang a secular song, a lover remembering the time when she first met her lover and the moonlit night, and then she's looking back now that they're married and thinking, oh, if that feeling could be there again, I want to go back to that place. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was saying it at Rath Yatra, and many people couldn't understand why a sannyasi was singing this secular song at the Rath Yatra. And Sarup Damodar could understand, and so did Rupa Goswami, but no one knew until he wrote a parallel verse in which he justified what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was singing with the lament of Srimati Radharani at Kurukshetra, which is the theme of Rath Yatra, where, as we heard the other day from Madhavananda Prabhu, all the inhabitants of Dwarka, their opulent chariots, armies, had gone to Kurukshetra. A bard had gone out around the world to announce that Krishna was going to observe the religious ceremonies at Kurukshetra during the eclipse of the sun. And that bard also came to Vraj, and certain sections of Vraj, then everyone that is, except for the coward boys, for various reasons, didn't come to Kurukshetra, but Srimati Radharani, the gopis did, Krishna's parents. And there they met, and when Krishna met Srimati Radharani and the gopis there, and they were standing in front of one another again after so long, over 100 years. And Srimati Radharani said, although you're standing here before me, then Krishna's indication is we can be together in Dwarka. And Srimati Radharani is saying, no, I want to be back by the Jamuna and be surrounded in the environment in Vrindavan. I can't experience the same feeling here at Kurukshetra, and that's the meaning of pulling Krishna back to Vrindavan, the gopis pulling him back. And Rupa Goswami understood the meaning of the song that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sung, so he wrote the parallel verse, and that time writing was on palm leaves. There's a stylus that you used to impress on the leaf to make the letters, and then you'd put it in the sun, and the places where you had pressed, it would turn dark, and that would make the letters. He took that long piece of the scripture that he had written, and he placed it in the thatch of the roof where he was staying. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had just come there and saw it sticking out like a flag. So he pulled it out and he read it. And he was surprised. So when he then met Rupa Goswami, he mildly slapped him in love and said, how did you know my heart? How did you know my mind? And we have in this verse, Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam, that Rupa Goswami could understand the inner workings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as evidence from that pastime in the Antya Lila. Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shivishakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindho, Dinabandho Jagatpate, Gopesha Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta Namostute, Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi, Radhe Vrindavaneshwari, Vrishabhanu Sute Devi, Pranamami Hari Priye, Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha, Patitanam Pavanibhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda, Nitai Namineche, Namirhate, Shradamulyenam Tite Ched. Nitai Namineche, Namirhate, Shradamulyenam Tite Chere. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, So aham kraturaham yagya swadaham aham aushadam. Mantroham aham evagnyam. Ham agnir aham hutam. And I have to find my app again. Come back. Now it's closed. Inconvenience regretted. 9:16? Yeah? So, would you all be up for discussing this verse a little bit?
Yes.
Okay. Here it is again. But it is I who am the ritual, I the sacrifice, the offering to the ancestors, the healing herb, the transcendental chant, I am the butter and the fire and the offering. And before this verse, for context, we have Jnana Jagnena Chapyanye Yajanto Mamupasate Ekatvena Pratakvena Bahuda Vishuto Mukam. Here Krishna is describing categories of people in various mentalities. He does that in the Bhagavad Gita. For instance, in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes 4 kinds of people who are pious. He says, Chaturvida bhajante mam jana sukritino arjuna arto jignasa artarti jnani cha bharatarshabha. There are 4 kinds of pious people. Those who are in distress, those who are in need of money, those who are inquisitive, and those who are in knowledge of the absolute truth. And here's another list. Jnana yagnena chapyanya yajanto mam upasate ekatvena prataktvena bahuda vishuto mukam. So here he's describing people who have some semblance of knowledge of the Supreme, but it's a little off kilter. So he says, there are others who engage in sacrifice for the cultivation of knowledge, worship the Supreme Lord as the one without a second, as diverse in many and in the universal form. So, the purport is important. This verse is the summary of the previous verses. The Lord tells Arjuna that those who are purely in Krishna consciousness and do not know anything other than Krishna are called Mahatma. Yet there are other persons who are not exactly in the position of Mahatma, but who worship Krishna also in different ways. Some of them have already been described as the distressed, the financially destitute, the inquisitive, and those who are engaged in the cultivation of knowledge. But there are others who are still lower. And these are divided into 3. He who worships himself as one with the Supreme Lord. He who concocts some form of the Supreme Lord and worships that. And 3, he who accepts the universal form, the Vishvarup of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and worships that. Out of the above 3, the lowest, those who worship themselves as the Supreme Lord, thinking themselves to be monists, are most predominant. Such people think themselves to be the Supreme Lord, and in this mentality they worship themselves. This is also a type of God worship, for they can understand that they are not the material body, but are actually spirit soul. At least such a sense is prominent. Generally, the impersonalists worship the Supreme Lord in this way. The second class includes the worshippers of the demigods, those who by imagination consider any form to be the form of the Supreme Lord. And the third class includes those who cannot conceive of anything beyond the manifestation of this material universe. They consider the universe to be the supreme organism or entity and worship that. The universe is also a form of the Lord. And that gives us a little context for why Krishna is then mentioning in the next verse that, but, there's a but, it is I who am the ritual, I the sacrifice, the offering to the ancestors, the healing herb, the transcendental chant, I am the butter and the fire and the offering. And the conclusion, especially in these middle 6 chapters, Krishna is bringing the reader to, is that if one, as he says near the end of this chapter, is a conclusion to these points that we mentioned today, ananyas chintayantamam yejana paribhasate tesham nityabhyuktanam yogakshemam mahamyaham. If you absorb yourself just in worshiping me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then you won't be lacking anything, because I'm the origin of all these things. And here he's giving the detail of how he's everything. And this is a list. I'm the ritual, the sacrifice, the offering, the ancestors, the healing herb, the transcendental chant. I'm the butter and the fire and the offering. And it's reminiscent of the Purusha Sukta, which at the beginning of the creation, the rishis are performing sacrifice. But where are they getting the ingredients from? The ingredients are coming from the Virat, from the Supreme Lord himself. In fact, he becomes the sacrificial animal for the yajna. And from that yajna, which is performed with what? Krishna. All the elements are Krishna. He's there supporting everything. Then various other entities come from the yajna, birds and various species and so forth, spring forth from the yajna. And it's one of the themes of the Bhagavad Gita also. Krishna says, Bhuktaram jagyatapasam. That I am the one to whom you should offer sacrifice, because I'm the center and I can digest it and then distribute it to everyone else. If someone diverts one's attention and one's resources to others who are expansions of Krishna, Krishna says, for instance, in elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita, that by worshipping demigods, one is avidi purvakam. Avidi means a rule, a regulation, a way to do something properly, and avidi means you're just doing it wrong. It's meant to be offered to yajna, which means Vishnu or Krishna. And this is helpful, as we discussed this morning, because everyone's looking for a return on their investment. Where can I put my resources where I will get the most out of it? And Krishna says, then give everything to me. I'm all these things anyway. And when you're performing karma kanda, which means that you have some way of following the Vedic rituals so that you can elevate yourself. The idea of karma kanda is the material world's eternal. There is nothing else besides the material world, and the best you can do is continually elevate yourself to stay in a higher position. But Krishna indicates here, I'm the one arranging it all, and everything that you're using to elevate yourself, it's all me anyway. So best to surrender to me. Give your heart and soul and your worship to me and perform sacrifice for me. Krishna says also in this chapter that whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer and give away, whatever sacrifice you perform, just do it as an offering to me. And that's helpful. It also is a similar idea, or at least to me it seems somewhat parallel to a verse where Krishna says, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir, Brahmagnau Brahmanohutam, Brahmaiva, Tena Gantavya, Brahmakarma Samadhina. That all the ingredients that you use, and the example, the metaphor he's giving is of a fire yajna. Whatever you're using there, and the priest who's doing it, and so forth. Because if they're engaged in worshiping the Supreme, then they all are transformed, and they're no longer material, but they become spiritual. So one can transform whatever one has by offering it in the right place, giving it to Krishna or Yajna. Questions, comments, or discussion? Malini?
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, in the previous verse, in the purport that we were reading on 15th verse, it is mentioned that there are three categories of people. One is that who thinks themselves as God and they worship themselves. Then there is demigod worship, and then the impersonalist. So in the first category, about the monist, does it include the Mayavadis and the one who are worshipping the Brahman effulgence, or can you please elaborate on that, Prabhu?
Yes, it includes those who think that they're God. That's what he's saying there, specifically. And they think they're God, so they're doing a kind of worship, but they're thinking, I'm included in the worship because I'm also God. So that's the information that they have. And about worshiping the effulgence of the Lord, it depends. There's a way in which there are, in a sense of shantaras, sometimes somebody has an appreciation for the Brahmajyoti, but they're not necessarily Mayavadis. They may have that neutral sense of just appreciation for the effulgence of the Lord. Point is that Krishna's being very generous. He's saying, and Prabhupada says, at least they have the sense that they're not the body. There's something spiritual there. And we meet people like that, different combinations and permutations of this kind of consciousness. People will say, I prayed to the universe. I prayed to the universe, I needed a new car. And I prayed to the universe, look, I got a new car. The universe gave me a car. In general, in the 13th chapter of the Gita, there's a verse in which Krishna says some people are inclined to hear from authorities. And if they hear from the right authority, then they just accept it. And then they can be properly situated. And in this purport, Prabhupada says, some people profess some philosophy, but he said, but actually in this age, there is no philosophy. There's no philosophy at all. There's a mishmash of ideas that are mostly disjointed. We don't find any philosophical backing behind many of these ideas. They're just fragmental ideas and concoctions about God and how to worship Him and so forth. So it's helpful that Krishna is giving very straightforward advice that I'm God, worship me. That helps. Because it's a touchy subject here in the material world. Isn't it? Even in India. It's hard to bring it up because it's a secular government. It's like, well, if we let you in, then we have to let everybody in. And it's hard to have that discussion and have everybody somehow get along. So you have to do the best you can. Another point or question? Yes?
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Just to kind of piggyback on Malini's question, is there a consequence to those misconceptions? Or?
Yeah. Actually, you find it in the Śrī Īśopaniṣad. It's, how does the verse go? No, that's the one I always quote. some who worship the impersonal absolute. Look it up. There's a consequence for everything. One of the points of Krishna Krishna makes in the Bhagavad Gita. Everything has a consequence. There's a sequence that unfolds from whatever we do, wherever we put our energy and so forth. Andam tama pravishanti yesham bhutim upasate tato bhuye viti tamo ya'u sambhutyamrataha. And the translation is, and the winner is, go ahead. You have to send an email to get that to go.
Hare Krishna. The translation is, those who are engaged in the worship of demigods enter into the darkest region of ignorance, and still more so do the worshippers of the impersonal absolute.
When it's off track, there's a consequence. There's a consequence even if it's on track, which means that you become properly situated. So, yes, there's a consequence. Which means that if you're misinformed and you put your heart into that, then consequences that you won't reach the goal. If you put the ladder on the wall and you didn't put it the way you wanted to go, once you get up there, you're going to be disappointed. Yes, Ekadashi Prat. Try to pick her a winning microphone.
So this idea of the worshiping the universe or giving gratitude to the universe, could that also be seen as like envy in the sense of I don't want to give credit to God, or think God is a person, but I'll just accept the universe as like a general.
It could be in a practical sense, but oftentimes people just aren't fully informed. There are different types of people, and their motives may be different. And oftentimes when people get a hold of a Śrī Īśopaniṣad, for instance, and they read it, and then they say, oh, okay, I'll worship Krishna. Or we have experience in presenting Krishna consciousness in a systematic way to people, and it's often or always a conundrum when to bring up the point that God's a person. In fact, in any presentation anywhere, there's always a reticence to cross that bridge. But we have found that people are often more ready than one might think. And it's a relief, actually, that somebody finally comes out and says it. God's a person. By the way, and I remember back to the good old days, and when I first got a Back to Godhead magazine, I had read so many books that had this impersonal conception, because that's what was available in my library and in my parents' house and wherever I get my hands on. And there were directives to offer prayers, and then in the same paragraph there were descriptions of how we're God. We just haven't realized yet. And that was a conundrum for me, because I thought, am I praying to myself? I thought maybe it'll work out. I'll figure it out later. But when I read the Back to Godhead magazine, the revelation came when I was looking at an advertisement for the Śrī Īśopaniṣad. And it said, the ancient Vedic literatures say, actually the Supreme Absolute Truth is a person. And I looked, and there was actually a picture of a person there. And I thought, oh my God. Somebody finally came out and said it. I found it to be a great relief that someone had the strength of purpose to just say God's a person. And I got rather excited about it. I wanted to read that book right away and find out, well, how's he a person? And most people are, I believe, at least the ones I've come in contact with, are innocent. They've been given partial information or misinformation, and sometimes it takes a while to sort that out. But it's a much actually easier concept to accept that God's a person than it is with all the workarounds that you have to do for he's not a person. And in general, the sense of ignoring a person, that's there also. Icha dvesha samutena dvandva mohena bharata sarva bhutani sam. Icha dvesha samutena dvandva mohena bharata sargayanti parantapa. There's a way in which that sort of envy pervades the world, Krishna says. People have this aversion to the idea of God. Over these vita ragabaya krodha, overcome these inordinate attachments to the material world without militant renunciation, but showing how to gradually control the senses. Hey, it feels good to be able to control your senses and use things in service of the Lord and not be unnecessarily attached to matter, which is a real drag, actually, to be attached to matter. And then to be able to embrace one's personhood and mean really who we are without the mask. I have a friend, Jeff Walkup. Actually, he wasn't my friend, but he was a football hero in high school. He was a senior when I think I was a freshman. But everybody knew him because he was such a great athlete. And years later, I'd totally forgotten his name. But you never forget a hero's name, really. And then it turned out that one of my best friends and godbrother, Satyadev Prabhu, knew him. He brought up his name and said, Jeff Walkup, I know that guy. They had been on an ambulance together for like 3-4 years in San Francisco. What a coincidence. I said, the Jeff Walkup from Del Valle High School? And anyway, it led to this conversation I had where after the Loma Prieta earthquake, and he had been one of the first responders and had saved a bunch of people. It got in the papers, and he became well known in the Bay Area for having risked his life and stuff like that. And soon afterwards, he retired from the fire department, which also included the EMC. They merged the two. And he had written an article about taking off the mask. He said, taking off the mask of the hero. And it was this very interesting article about what a burden it was to be considered a hero. Because he said, I'm not actually a hero. I'm struggling myself. And the compelling nature of being called a hero and how it led to sort of an imbalance in his life. He got a lot of acclaim for the article. It was well written. Anyway, I appreciated the idea of removing the mask. It's something Krishna talks about to Uddhava, where he says, Sway sway adhikarya nishta saguna parikirtita, which basically means just be yourself and do the best you can with who you are right now. Don't try to embellish and be something you're not, and it'll be enough. And also sort of the very uncomfortable feeling of being a person with a material identity, which is like a mask, is it's awkward, to say the least. It can be torturous, actually, trying to be somebody you're not. And then having the sense of imposter syndrome, I'm not good enough, or then the hero complex, I can fix everything. There are a lot of psychological troubles that come along with personhood, just in general. The only cure for them is to be a properly situated person. So that has to do with being your natural self as a servant of Krishna. So all those things can be anomalies. He said, Krishna says, Vitaraga, Bhaya, Krodha. You have to give those up. Vitaraga, Bhaya, Krodha. Manmaya mamupashrita. Bahavo jnana tapasa. Putamad bhavamag. People have become purified of those. And he says, many people. It's also in the voice of, don't worry, you've got this, you can do this, you can overcome these anomalies, they're not eternal. And that's, Krishna consciousness has a lot to do with that. These misconceptions, which lead to things like being envious of God unnecessarily. That's what, with a cure, that verse, Bhayam Dvitiya Biniveshita Syad, which I've quoted a few times already. He says, Ishad apetasya viparit smriti. What's your problem? You just turn around the wrong direction. Why don't you just turn around? Tanmayat Buddha abhajit tam bhaktyayke yesham guru devatatma. Said, there's a cure for this. Just turn around, would you? You're facing the wrong direction. You have this idea, I'm competitor of God, but actually, you don't have to compete. You can serve God. And if you want to just, bhakti means turning around again and being the servant. Any last things? Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
When I'm sitting in Vaiśeṣika Prabhu's class or my Guru Maharaj class, the mask is easy to take it off. But then in the context of when you were speaking about return of investment, Krishna is very clear, the sadhus are very clear, but there are parts of me. There's a part in me that is still thinking, what's in it for me? And I might be judgmental about people who may go for, this thing about secret and the manifestation and people writing their desires to the universe, asking them to be fulfilled. I might, externally, I might be judgmental about their intention to do that, going away from Krishna, but I find that there are parts in me that wears that mask in order to be accepted. But how do I increase that faith and remove the mask? Because constantly there are triggers to hold up the mask. There are constant triggers for name and recognition, even among a community of devotees or something. So this is a very huge thing for me. When you brought up about the mask, it was like, wow, that's perfect. Like in the context of what's the return? Yes, I'm supposed to give everything to Krishna, but there's a struggle. There's a struggle to completely, hey Govinda, and there's always something that I want to control, something I want to keep to. And so is there something to help stay humble, to help be in that position of not seeking for return, but truly just being authentic, being myself in that true sense of surrender?
Yeah, what a good question. And I really appreciate the conundrum. Can empathize. It's not an intellectual adjustment, but it has to do with spiritual advancement. And we really are okay as spiritual beings in relationship to Krishna. And when we have genuine spiritual connection, then there's a way in which the other troubling attachments and misconceptions tend to gradually diminish. And of course there's a period of time in which we have a taste for Krishna consciousness, and we also have a conviction that it is the right path. But then there's a period of time in which we struggle with the inability to fully carry out the process. And Krishna mentions that interim period in a verse, I think it's in the 11th canto, he says, Jata Shada Matkatasu Nirvina Sarvakaramasu Veda Dukatmakam Kamams Parityage Panishvara Tato Bhajeta Mamprita Shraddha Lurjara Nishchaya Jushamanam Shtatam Kamams Duko Darkams Jagarayan. And in this verse he names a person whose faith has awakened. Jata means to be born. Shraddha, the faith is awakened. Matkatasu, faith is awakened in the process of hearing and chanting, that this is the panacea. Nirvina Sarvakarmasu, there's a way in which the person also has a clear understanding that sense gratification leads to misery. Veda Dukatmakam Kamams, that my attachments to the material world are inconvenient, causing inconvenience. But Parityage Pranishvara means that still I don't have the spiritual strength to give them up yet. Like Ishvara means the supreme controller, and it also means the power to do something. So Parityage, I can't give things up because I don't have the strength yet. I still feel a little weak in heart. So those lingering desires, subtle growths for sense gratification one way or the other, they're still there. So then Krishna just says, well, keep going because you'll get there. And Tato Pujeta Mamprita, you're very dear to me, know that. You're practicing devotional service. It's very important what you're doing. It's going to be successful. He gives these kind of encouragements. We talked about some of those today, earlier. And he said you can have a little bit of remorse for your condition, but not too much. The acharyas had given commentary on the last line that says, Gariyan, be a little more remorseful, but not so much that you discourage yourself, because that's another trick of Maya to say, well, I can't do anything, and that's illegal. You can't say that you're permanently unqualified, because if the Shastras say, rise to this level of perfection, it means you can do it. That's what Vyasadeva says of the Vedanta Sutra. Otherwise, what's the use of the Shastra? Because it's speaking to us. If we couldn't do it, if we were permanently unqualified, then the Shastra would have no meaning. So spiritual advancement is the answer. And when we have genuine connection to Krishna, then a lot of misconceptions are automatically dissipate. For instance, the endless machinations about how I fell from the spiritual world to a lower realm have a lot to do with a psychological debilitation because of lacking spiritual realization. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says as much in the Jaiva Dharma that when you have what he calls chit samadhi, you have a clear idea about who you really are spiritually, you really don't have many psychological hang-ups, and the idea of how bad things can happen to such a good person as me, they diminish because you realize that I never had anything to do with the material world in the first place. Asango hyayam purushaha. Spiritual realization gives one this sense of waking up from a dream where I was imagining all these maneuvers I have to make in order to maintain my false self. And when I wake up from it, then it's not an issue. So the answer simply is spiritual advancement. So if one as one continues and becomes spiritually aware of oneself and one's relationship to Krishna, then many of these misconceptions or lingering ways in which I'm trying to position myself in this world are diminished. However, as long as we're in the material world, it's always going to be something. Because if you look at even the most advanced devotees, the Pandavas, as was noted by Narada, hey, what's up? Look at you guys. Krishna hangs out in your house, and why are all these weird things happening to you? So there's always something. But for those who are fully aware, or even partially aware, or even have a tiny semblance of awareness of their identity as servants of Krishna, Krishna's Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Jeev Krishna Das e Bishwas Korleto Ortu Konai. If you're fully invested in, I'm the servant of Krishna, then a lot of these pushings and feelings of being inadequate or still wanting something to boost my ego somehow, they become diminished and inconsequential eventually. Okay? Got to chant good rounds. And you have to go on with the process too, because it's a lifetime endeavor. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam. Does Lord Krishna say that we should not conduct any sacrifice for the demigods? Like, he mentions that give everything to me. Is there a thing that there is no sacrifice for demigods? Because I've seen most of the people doing sacrifice for the demigods.
Most of which people?
Normal people.
Normal people? Yes, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes strong points about how it's not necessary to individually worship the demigods. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he's demonstrative about it also. In fact, the story of the lifting of Govardhan Hill starts with Krishna asking questions, leading questions to his father about why they're worshipping Indra. Why do you even have to do that? And he diverts their worship to Govardhan Hill. And then Krishna reveals that he's also Govardhan Hill. And in that pastime, he's showing that if you worship him, then you're naturally worshiping all the demigods. When you chant Brahma Samhita, you notice that the way there are many demigods mentioned, but they're all mentioned in the context of being servants of Krishna. For instance, Ganesh. When Ganesh is mentioned, it says, well, he's getting his power from the Lord because he's keeping the Lord's lotus feet on his head. So then there's a not so subtle indication there that, well, why not just worship the person who he's getting his power from? So that's the best idea. And there are cases where you find that devotees worship demigods. For instance, in the story of the Shamantaka jewel. It's a long story, I'm not going to tell the whole thing, but in fact it's the longest, most convoluted story perhaps in the Bhagavatam. And there is a point at which when the devotees from Dwarka had gone out with Krishna when he was trying to clear his name, he had been accused of killing Prasena, the brother of Satyajit, who had gone out for a joyride with the Shamataka jewel, riding around like, don't do that. Next thing you know, a lion jumps through your window and kills you. And then, anyway, he had gone into a cave because that's where the forensic evidence led. And all the villagers were waiting outside, and they waited so long that they thought, we don't know what happened, but they were morose. They came back and they started a sacrifice for Durga. But the purpose of it was, please save Krishna and bring him back. And actually at the end of the sacrifice, when they offered the last oblation, Krishna came riding into town with a new wife, Satyabhama, and the Shamataka jewel. That's how Krishna does things. And you'll find that Rukmini also, she made a prayer to Durga. It was traditional that young women, before they get married, they do puja for Durga, but her prayer was, please let Krishna be my husband. So were the young gopis, when they worship goddess Katyayani. Their whole worship was about, please let Krishna be my husband. You see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he traveled in South India, he went and visited many temples of demigods. But he went there and he saw them in relationship as they were servitors of the Lord. So we don't neglect the demigods or think that they're insignificant. There's a way in which we appreciate them. So therefore we have the first offense, blasphemy devotees. Second offense, consider the names of demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the names of Vishnu. We should see that they're connected, they're Krishna's servitors. So if you have a healthy understanding of who the demigods are, some people even, they'll have Gaurnitai or Radha Krishna in their house, and they also have some demigods. But the proper place for the demigods is not on the same altar with Krishna. But you can put them adjacent, and after you offer bhoga to Krishna, you can give some of the prasad to the demigods if you want. That's their position. Otherwise you make a big mistake, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Kadashi Prat.
Two things. One is a comment, the other is a question. The comment is, I just was on a pilgrimage with His Holiness Bhakti Dear Damodar Maharaj, and we went to Dwarka, and we went to the cave.
Oh, really?
Where, it was really,
wow.
it was amazing. It was really amazing. And the other thing I wonder is, so this, like where Krishna speaks about those who worship the demigods, how do you make that relevant, like for Western people who, because I had a conversation with a family member, and they were like, well, I don't worship demigods. Like, is there some way to correlate that?
Well, one thing is, if it's not broke, don't try to fix it. Like sometimes if you bring things up that you know are outside the understanding of the context of the person, I'm going to throw a bunch of cliches out here. Don't open a can of worms, because it may not be necessary. Try to attend to their level of understanding and the context that they have already. And in reading the literatures that we have, it's the main job of a modern presenter of Bhagavad Gita is to give context to everything as much as possible, and oftentimes preemptively. So if demigods come up, you might explain what the context of the culture is and the hierarchy in the universe and how it's explained, if you think that you're going to come into a section where you're going to need to explain it. And again, if it's not something that they brought up as a burning issue, trying to bring it up into their awareness, unless you think it's going to be necessary, you wait till there's a time when they really have a question about it. But in general, just explaining that everything has some personality, has a personal force, that energies come from a personal source. Prabhupada gives the example of electric company. You just think electricity comes into your house. And, I mean, my wife reminds me that there's a bill to pay. And it was higher than last month. And like, oh, there's a correlation between leaving the heater on during the winter or, being careful. And there, you can go back from there, and if you actually went to the source of the electricity and you traced it back, you'd find that there are people there that designed it. There's people that pull the switches and things like that. And that's there in the universe also. It's much more plausible than just energies organizing themselves, the idea of personality. So it's the natural default inclination for us as human beings to seek a personal source to things. It's just people have been brainwashed that these are archaic ideas, that there's some god or goddess behind things. But it's much more satisfying when you accept it, because that's the way it is. Yes, Kṛṣṇa Prabhu, please. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Hare Krishna. I find, in the Abrahamic monotheistic traditions, there's something missing or wrong. Their presentation is that there's one God and he's a jealous God. And he's very angry if you worship anyone else or anything else. And Krishna doesn't have any reason to be jealous. He already has everything. And he says, if like in the 10th chapter, that of the greatest of anything that inspires you and you're full of awe, the greatest of every category is a representation of his greatness. And in the 9th chapter, that if you worship some other deity with faith, you're really worshiping Krishna, but you're doing it in a wrong way. If you understand the proper Vedic tradition, the sacrifices for these different devas is supposed to be part of a worship of Krishna, or that he's supposed to be the enjoyer of the sacrifice, the only enjoyer of the sacrifice. So I always felt that the Vedic pantheon, and in Western tradition, at least in the Christian world, they never really they couldn't give up. They adopted this tradition where they suppressed paganism and so forth, but they lost so much that the Greek and Roman mythology and everything remained a very important part of the culture anyway. If you look at all the art and the sculpture, but I think it's something that's really lost in this monotheistic tradition. It's a improper understanding of Krishna, that he's jealous and angry. And it seems like it also makes them very afraid of offering respect to someone who's not the one only person that's supposed to get respect, rather than understanding how Krishna is represented through those who can be his representatives.
Yeah, it's a valid and very important and nice point. That's why I try to modify my answer about demigod worship to point out that Lord Chaitanya himself respected the demigods, and Vaishnavas worship the demigods in certain circumstances, but for the right purpose. And there are ways in which throughout the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam we can understand Krishna's sweetness, in the sense that he's for us. And everything we do that is that he considers worship towards him that gets counted, and you carry it with you in the next life. And any of the mistakes for which we apparently have, there's some reaction, that's also a kind of purification just to put us on the right path. The conception of eternal damnation and so forth is rather absurd and even obnoxious. So Krishna consciousness has a fuller understanding of God's personality and his intentions towards us. And that's very important. As you've often pointed out, it's a very worthy cause to popularize the Srimad Bhagavatam. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's uncivilized, this idea that, you have to go to war with somebody else because they worship a different god or something like that.
Be civilized and read the Bhagavatam. Become civilized. Otherwise, how will you be civilized? If you can't appreciate the full loving face of God, then how will you be civil to others and treat animals the way they should be treated as your children, and treat others with respect, knowing that they're going through myriad reactions because of being mixed up in karma and so forth. It's hard to have a nice society. Nowadays it seems to me that people have lost their way, and they've descended into ways of quarreling and even hating each other unnecessarily because of not having a way to align themselves in knowledge and also having a purificatory process for their lives. And therefore, Prabhupada says over and over again in his purports that people should take to the Sankirtan movement. Because if you chant God's names, you have direct connection with him. Today when we were in Harinam, I was just amazed at how Krishna just manifests right there in the holy name. It's the most attractive thing to hear the Sankirtan. It is overwhelmingly and direct. It's an overwhelming direct experience of spirituality, and people lack that. I notice most people are looking at their phones. Even here in Puri, I took a long walk this afternoon, and everybody who's sitting in a rickshaw or in a car, they're just... and I don't think they're reading Bhagavatam. So it's an important task to expand the knowledge of who Krishna is and the process by which one can become purified. And it's important also for us individually to experience it for ourselves so that we can have realization, when we speak from realization, that we actually do feel that we're becoming free from the lower modes of nature. Tada rajastamo bhava kamalobadayasche. There really is a time at which, by connecting to Krishna, we can see for ourselves that we're improved. So that's very important. So on that note, let's chant Hare Krishna. I liked the realizations last night were so fantastic. I've been waiting all day for this, and now I kind of jammed us. So nothing. It's my fault, and I'm sorry. Do we have some cards? Do I get to pick? Okay. We're picking 3. 1, 2. Wow, one's got a picture on it. 3. Okay. We have one from Chaitanya Priya. Actually, didn't last night we had each person read their own? Yeah. Where's Chaitanya Priya? Is she still in one piece? They were dancing pretty heavily back there. Here's your card. Shraddha's got it right here.
Can I sit down? Okay. Since Vedanta Sutra is the main practice for sannyasis, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya wanted to test Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. However, after 7 days of teaching, it was Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya who became the disciple of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He understood that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the Yuga avatar who has mercifully come to spread the holy name. We must know that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the spiritual, the personality of Godhead who has come as a manifestation of a pure devotee. Just like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya learned, I love Ujjwal Varma.
That sounded like a master's thesis. Nicely done. Okay, now, I don't know if you guys are stuffing the ballot box or what, but this is the Kshobhya Tirtha. Chaitanya Priya's daughters, in case you didn't fully get the joke.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. This title is The Moon of Tota Gopinath Shines Above Jagannath Mandir. So last evening we had a good fortune of just assembling, and suddenly devotees gathered and we left for the temple. And on our way back I got separated, in the sense I had to leave a little early. But time had its own sort of game to play. When I passed by at the outer periphery of the temple, there are these little jhankis, where they have, and one I had not noticed before was a Trinavar Vad, a jhanki of a Trinavat Vad, and there were these Uriya devotees who had gathered there, and they were singing in Uriya, but beautifully. They had such anurag, and I just stopped there, and I just stopped there for 20 minutes. I didn't understand a single word, but I could hear some Radhe Govinda, Achyuta Gopi kind of tune, but it wasn't Radhe Govinda. They were saying something else, but in my head it was ringing. Just knowing that I had time and I could just sit there was very liberating in the Dham. So I sat down, and looking up I saw the moon above the Jagannath temple. It is like a crescent. And in the morning we had gone to Tota Gopinath, and when you look at the white dress of the Mangala Arti sort of DT dress, it's white and it's shaped almost like the crescent moon, and it was like a saucer, like the way the moon was. And thinking of the Lord seated there, stealing our hearts, waiting to sort of, for us to offer our hearts to Him, was very liberating.
There's a beautiful picture there too. You might want to hold that up just to give a sense of the creativity. It was very nice. Thank you very much. And a third card, Śrī Radha Govinda Dasi.
Hare Krishna. Bhava Roga, the material disease, the bhava shifts like mist and waves, transient dreams that none can save. Srimad Bhagavatam, a timeless stream, sings beyond this fleeting dream, a language pure beyond decay, guiding souls to truth's own ray. And it's not that troubles come and go, the world itself a ceaseless woe. Abhinivesha, a clinging chain, do not let it birth more pain. Thank you, Gurudev.
This is fantastic. Wow. Well, because of me, there's only 3 tonight, so we'll definitely make a concerted effort to stop earlier tomorrow and get more of them in. Thank you for writing them. They're extremely powerful to hear these written realizations and the creativity in all of them. And now, Shraddha Devi Dasi, please tell us what we've won.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you, Maharaj, for the ecstatic afternoon and evening session. It was amazing. I have no regrets that we ran over time. It was amazing. So those of you who have already read your realizations, if you can pass them back to Rosine Mataji. Is she here? Rosine? Okay, over there. Yeah, Rosine, if you can mark them as having read, so that then I can give you the rest. Okay, so what have we won tomorrow? We are going to go to the Jagannath temple.
Haribol!
And we are going to do book distribution, Harinam, Kirtan. That's going to be fun and exciting. More details on, which gate to go, etc., we'll give you tomorrow. And so the morning program will be as usual, which starts with 5. Okay, I can see Halayuda saying that. We start with Tulsi Puja, followed by Japa Circle, and then Guru Puja, and then Srimad Bhagavatam class at 7:30, and then Prasadam, okay? And then we'll assemble. More details we'll give you tomorrow. A few more quick reminders here. Those who are joining us for phase 2 and who are not Indian citizens, you have to fill a form C. A couple of things about that form. These forms are available outside. If you haven't picked them up, please do pick them up. Roshni is taking care of that. She's sitting right at the back. There's a place there to put your picture. You don't have to put your picture there. They'll take an electronic picture for you. Number 2, you don't have to fill the form and give it back to me. You just keep it with you so that when you show up at the counter to check in, you just give them that. So it just hastens up the process there. Again, we are asking you to calculate the extra weight that you might carry, because then it's easier for you to buy extra thing. We have a couple of scales, that you can use to weigh. So we'll be happy to share those with you. Khaja, again, Roshni at the back is taking the request for Khaja, and he needs that by tomorrow morning, Manoranjan, so that he can place the order, etc. The flags which had, you might have noticed or didn't, that we didn't have flags this time. I was hoping not. Yeah. So there was. So our Chakadola Prabhu this time actually stitched. He and his wife had stitched it, and unfortunately the wife fell sick. And they had sent me nice videos, and and then so he had to ship them. And unfortunately, because of the winter season there, the courier could not bring it here on time. So I got the message that they have arrived here. At least Chakadola said they have arrived here, but the hotel is not able to trace them. So I'm looking for a volunteer who can, go and get it, because we need the flags for tomorrow for sure. I'm sure they're somewhere here, in the stores there. And then also one small thing is that I met a monkey on the terrace today. So it's a really big one. He was eating our sponge. Yeah. So just be careful. Yeah, the sponge. Somebody had kept the sponge from washing the DTs. I think the DT dishes. Yeah, so just be careful when you go out to hang your clothes there. There's a monkey there.
Yeah, and just remember your plate tomorrow will have monkey germs on it.
And it's a pretty ferocious one, because when I tried to shoo it away, it just came back and said, roar. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a big monkey. Yeah. It's a big one there.
Well, no one teach him how to steal glasses. He'll teach everybody else.
Yeah. Any questions or anything? Any help that anybody needs?
Hare Krishna. Mataji, are we going to do parikrama at the Jagannath temple?
Very likely. Yeah, okay. Yeah. More details. We are chalking that out, fine-tuning it. And why don't you join us after the, if you're not going anywhere else to chalk out the plan? Okay, yeah. Good. Yeah. We'll be meeting there outside. Yeah. Any other questions, any comments? All right, back to you, Maharaj.
Just Jagannath temple.
No. Thank you for reminding. Yeah, we're also going to Siddha Bakul. Yeah, after we do the parikram, after we do the Harinam there, we'll also go to Siddha Bakul Prabhu. How we reach from Jagannath temple to Siddha Bakul, we'll share all the details with you tomorrow. They say it's walkable, but I know not everybody can walk, so we'll try to, nail down the finer details on that. We'll do that. Yeah. Okay. Guruma?
That's when we're going traveling.
Yeah.
We're going to go traveling Sankirtan one of these days. Coming up. When is it? Day after tomorrow? Okay. And Shraddha Devi Dāsa, thank you very much for your eternal vigilance and keeping everything going. And for everybody who's volunteering, you're just making it such a harmonious environment. Sai Pran, you're the king of the Nagar Kirtan. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Thanks to your parents for raising a devotee who would be a luminary and spreading the Krishna consciousness movement. I love your Nagar Kirtan. I think better than I've ever heard. So thank you for what you're doing. Keep doing it. Fantastic kirtans, just amazing. We need more of it in the world, don't we? We want the Harinam to expand everywhere so everyone gets a chance to hear it and be affected by the holy name, and then have a place to go where they can have Sangha. And then everyone can come on yatra. And we just stay in yatra. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Lakshmi Nrsingadev, Shri Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadraji. If you so desire, please empower us to spread Harinam Sankirtan all over the world. Please give us the wherewithal to expand book distribution in ways that will shock the general public in every part of the world. That there's a Hare Krishna on every block and a set of books in everybody's house. Please fulfill Karunatha Prabhu's desire that all the thinking people of the world, of which there shouldn't be such a big goal to reach, receive the Srimad Bhagavatam and appreciate it deeply. Please keep everybody safe on our yatra and healthy, and please let us dance our lives away in Harinam Kirtan and forget about the material world altogether, except for when we need to engage it in your service, our dear Lord Chaitanya. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpadruscha kripasindave vichapatitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha ananta koti vaishnaviki jai go premanande haribo. Prasadam for all our friends.